I want to share with you guys 11 tips and tricks you can do to immediately improve in Pokemon Unite. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into the first one, which is memorize the timing of the initial farm spawn. So that's when you are going to the top lane or the bottom lane. Understand where the farm is, where the farm will spawn, and at what time it will spawn. So let's have a very quick breakdown of the top lane. You can see at the 9-minute 40 mark, there are 4 bunnies in either corner, 2 on your side of the map and 2 on the enemy side. There's also a Baltoy in the middle. Generally, the middle farm is the contested or the public farm, and that's the farm you want to secure because generally the stuff on your side of the map, the enemy will have to overcommit to get there. So they are playing risky. You can see the enemy Squirtle has overcommitted to try and get me. Now there's also a bunny that spawns at the top at 9 minutes 20 in that top lane. However, me and my laning partner have decided killing the Blastoise and having a 2v1 or a potential 2v2 if the enemy jungler comes up puts us in a better situation to secure more of the farm or get better positioning in the lane. So we made that decision versus going for that bunny and letting the Blastoise get out alive. Now these bees or these birds are going to spawn at 8 minutes 50, and generally as a jungler you need to be in either the top lane or the bottom lane. Now if we consider the farm spawn on the bottom lane, you can see at 9:45 instead of 9:40 there's that contested middle farm. It's in top Autono. Now the Autonodes will give you, it's an Aditi, and they'll give you more experience than the bunnies, so they are very useful to go for. At 9 minutes 40 you can see you've got those 4 corners on your side and their side of the map. You can think of that as your farm and the enemy farm that you can contest for, but generally if it's on your side of the map it's fairly safe. Now additionally in the bottom lane at 9 minutes 15 you can see there is a bottom in DD that spawns in the middle as well. So there's 2 pieces of contested farm in the bottom lane and they are worth a chunky bit of experience. So you want to try and get that over your enemy so you can get a nice edge. So generally stacking in the bottom lane means that you're going to compromise that farm, so you're actually giving the enemy a better lead. So if you're going to stack, generally it's best practice to go into the top lane. Now as you can see, these birds spawn here at 8 minutes 50, and once that's done, if you're still a little bit behind, you can go up to the middle of the map at 8 minutes 40 to get that Baltoy that spawns there and go straight back to your lane. Now as a jungler, this Xatu is the first thing you want to take out, and then at 9 minutes 45 you get 2 buffs and 2 Baltoys in that middle area. I would definitely suggest going from buff, then Baltoy to Baltoy as you clear this, because exactly 1 minute later, those buffs and this farm will spawn again. So as you can see, this person has gone Baltoy, then buff, and then goes Baltoy, then buff. I think that's a little bit of a weird clear, because when that farm respawns, it's going to respawn in that order. And I think you want to prioritize killing the farm that's worth the most experience first. So generally in the jungle clear, you want to go buff, Baltoy, Baltoy, and then you look to gank a lane. Generally while you're doing this, because it's uncontested, you want to pan your map over to see which lane is kind of weaker or which lane needs a little bit more support, or whatever strategy you want to do to go up and have a successful gank to get your team online. Now, tip number 3 would be to pick a role in the lane that complements the person you are laning with. This is my general rule of thumb. In the lane, you either have one of the speedsters, attackers, or all-arounders, and then you have a defender or a supporter. See, that's your combination, right? If your laning partner picks Snorlax, then probably don't pick Slowbro to lane with them. If your laning partner picks Gardevoir, then probably not a great idea to pick Delphox in the same lane. You want to make sure your lane is well structured and you both understand your role in the lane. Generally, in that laning phase, if you're playing the defender or the supporter, you want to try and funnel the experience into your laning partner. So you want to give them more experience. Now, I know some people would disagree with me there, saying that in the solo queue they feel like they need to carry, but I just think that's a bad idea, because if you've picked that supporter or the defender, your teams are relying on you to play your role, and they will generally be playing around accordingly. So tip number 3, pick a role that complements what your other laning partner is doing. Tip number 4, understand if your Pokemon is an attacker or a special attacker. Now, the perfect resource to do this is go to UniteDB, which is what we're going to talk about in tip number 10. Now, the reason you need to understand this is because you're going to be building items and creating item builds on your Pokemon. And some items are specifically useful for physical attackers, and other items are specifically useful for special attackers. And there are some items that are also good for tanks and are almost useless on a attacker or a speedster, for example. So if we go over to UniteDB, you can see I can filter for a special attacker or a physical attacker, and then I can have a look at some of these items. So I need to know, for example, if I pick Gardevoir, who is a special attacker, the Slick Spoon is a good item because it helps increase special attack, or it debuffs their special defense. Whereas if I'm using something like a Charizard, I might consider an attack weight or a muscle band because those items will help give me additional attack. If I used a Slick Spoon on Charizard, it is essentially like playing without an item slot because you are not getting any value out of using that item. Tip number 5, don't be a part of the double jungle shenanigans. Okay, it's not a good idea. If you have claimed the jungle and someone on your team decides that they want to play in the jungle, just let them play in the jungle. Okay, it's not worth fighting over. That farm is there to help someone on your team get ahead, generally in solo queue, and so what you want to do is pick a laning Pokemon. Okay, pick something in lane that you enjoy, and you can go from there. Okay, there are obviously going to be games where you might think, oh well, the only Pokemon that I can pick is a defender or a supporter, and generally in these games I like to pick Eldegoss. I've done a really solid guide on Eldegoss and how to use Eldegoss in the solo queue. I absolutely recommend that you should check that out. Tip number 6 is always be with your team at the Ray fight. Always, always, always. Don't try to look to get 100 points because it's bang on 2 minutes and you think you're being sneaky. Remember, when you're scoring, the enemy has got vision on where you are, because when you're scoring, you pop up on their minimap. So you need to be very, very careful of that. At the Ray fight, you need to be with your team. If your team decides to overcommit a little bit, then maybe you need to try and back them up, because if you stand back and do nothing and they all die, then you're in a 1v4 situation. So follow your team, be with your team. That is my recommendation. There are going to be some games in the solo queue that are just heartbreaking, and you're going to watch your team almost throw the game with their poor positioning, but there's nothing you can do about that other than try and keep yourself safe and help your team in the fights. Tip number 7 is, if you are stacking in the lane, do not die for your stacks ever. This is a rule. You do not die when you are stacking in Pokemon Unite. If you think getting an extra 12 attack stat is worth a death and worth the enemy getting the experience to kill you, and then also getting the experience to take your farm, so you're going to compound your loss for the sake of getting 12 attack stat, that's when you're in desperate survival mode. That's when you have hard lost the lane, it's 7 minutes, you haven't played the early game properly, and now you are using items that require you to get some stacks in, and you're already behind, so you're at a case of, well, I need to get a little further behind so I can invest in my attack stat. If you're playing early and you die for a stack, you are, in my opinion, throwing the game. Tip number 8 is to learn the rotation timings as a jungler. If you decide to pick the jungle and take the jungle experience, you are responsible for helping carry your team. You are a big part of your team's success. That is when you go to a lane to help them gank and get online. That's getting ahead with levels compared to the other jungler. That's making sure you don't die, because if you die and you've got a big experience lead, you're going to give the enemy a lot of experience. If you're level 13, for example, and you die to someone who's level 10, they will immediately jump to level 12. They get a very, very big power spike from that. So as a jungler, you've got a lot of responsibilities, and time is of the essence. You have not a second to waste when you are playing in the jungle. So if you don't know how to play in the jungle, I've got a video that shows rotational timings. I would absolutely recommend watching this. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with playing in the jungle and practicing that role if you're not that great. Everybody's got to start somewhere, but you need to play it with a purpose. You can't go in blind, and you can't just be throwing games, not showing up to ganks because you want to get the buff experience early. I think that's a really bad decision, and something that you could definitely do to improve playing in Pokemon Unite. Tip number 9. If you are behind, if your team is making some pretty, in your own opinion, poor decisions, don't ping them on the map. Don't spam thanks. Don't tilt your games. Okay, just understand that people are generally trying to play their best, and people do get behind when they play this game, right? And that's part of it, and that's totally fine, right? When you play a game, by nature, generally one team is going to be ahead and one team is going to be behind. The best way to lose the game and compound that loss is to tilt when you're behind, right? You're going to lose 100% of the games that you surrender, and you're going to lose a lot of games that you just mentally tap out from by tilting or getting mad at your team or ping your team or anything like that. So, in my opinion, if you want to improve immediately, take a check of how you are mentally going when you are in the game. Try not to tilt, try not to ping your teammates, try to keep in control of your emotions when you're playing the game. It can be frustrating, but like I said, you're going to lose a lot of games if you are just tilting. Tip number 10 is utilize the resources provided by the Pokemon Unite community, specifically by the math cord, the Unite database. This is an excellent resource provided by a group of people who have used experimental data from Pokemon Unite to create formulas and to create all kinds of amazing things and put it on a website for free for the community to use to try and get a little better at the game. That is absolutely amazing. So let's just do a little tour of how we want to use this resource. So talking through how I interpret this, if I click on a Pokemon, it will tell you this stuff, the ability, how the auto works, how the boosted auto works, and how the skills work. So this is Mew in particular. Now, this isn't really where the value of UniteDB comes in. It's more this information on the side here, and this lifesteal information, and this crit rate information. And you can scroll through the levels. So as you can see, Mew has no critical hit rate or no lifesteal. So lifesteal is like you attack and you heal a percentage based of the damage that you do, right? Mew has no natural of that. Okay, it'll also tell you the buffs that you get when you use the Unite moves. Like you get a shield and you get cooldown reduction. That's what CDR is, cooldown reduction. And you also get movement speed, and it tells you how long that duration lasts for. These are all things that the game doesn't tell you. Okay, you also get, like, for example, coaching. What does it do? It gives you a shield, but how much of a shield? And you can click on this little eye for information. And so at level 13, it will give you roughly 1000 HP, whereas early game at level 5, it will give you about 500 HP. Right, so all of these are things which are really, really good. Whereas if I pick another Pokemon, something like a Decidueye, let's say, now I can go down and see I can scroll through the levels and see I've got a 30% crit rate and a 20% lifesteal. But see how it says note? Only Razor Leaf and autos can critically strike. So even if you use Spirit Shackle and you think, whoa, that's so much damage that I could do and I could critically strike that, this move will never critically strike. Even if you have the Scope Lens and the Razor Claw and you've got everything you could possibly want in the entire world, this skill will not crit. Only things, that's why it says note, the only thing that will crit is your Razor Leaf autos and your auto attacks, not any other skill. So your Shadow Claw is not going to crit or anything like that. Now, Pokemon UniteDB will also give you builds, which in my opinion are really, really solid. For one, I actually quite like this build. I think it's pretty good. It gives you a little bit of an explanation as well, and you can have a look at some emblem loadouts if you wish. And you can also have a look at stats. It'll take you through each level, what the stats of that Pokemon are. So you can see cooldown reduction, you get nothing, but you adopt critical hit rate of 15% at level 5, and then when you hit that level 9, that's your nice power